Welcome to Tech Brothers. In this video, we're going to learn what are synonyms and how to create synonyms in database of SQL Server. Synonyms basically are alias, but they're more towards object in a database. So I have a couple scenarios up here. One is that whenever your application which is accessing a particular table in a SQL Server, they have to define their string server name, database name, schema name, and then they get to table. So synonym, what synonym does is it takes this whole string and make an alias to this particular table. I'm going to put it this way: my table, or dbo.mytable. Let's say DBO was schema of the synonym and my table. So anytime your application you wanted to configure the string to get to this table, all you need to do is you can go ahead and use dbo.mytable, and it'll recognize that, oh, okay, you're referring to this table, this schema name, this database name, and this server name. So it is very useful under this scenario. Sometimes I'm not sure that if you happen to see database names of SharePoint, when it creates a default database name, they are really big. And let's say that your server name is huge. That's gonna be problem when you configure your application with this connection string. So basically, back behind the scene, is a conceptual way. I'm not telling you word-to-word definition of synonyms. If you wanted to know more word-to-word definition of synonyms in database, you can go to Microsoft website, and they have much more detail about that. But basic concept behind synonyms are that you shorten your string and make an alias of your string towards database object. And it doesn't have to be just table. Any user-defined table, any user-defined views, any user-defined function, any user-defined store procedure, you can create a synonym of that. And the second scenario up here, let's say that this table location has changed. Now this table is not in this particular database, so, or not in particular this schema. Now what? You have to go back to your application config file and change your connection all over again and provide all the connection. In order to avoid these two issues, the concept of synonyms came in SQL Server, which is really great. A lot of organizations, application, especially the developers that are building application locally, and they don't want to go ahead and change their connection string every time they do some test on their development and bring it to QA and all that. They like to use synonyms and use those tables and get the tables or store procedure or views from their from the application side. So these are the two big scenarios. There are other scenarios that you can use synonym for, but these are two big scenarios that I'm taking forward, and we're gonna go ahead and use SQL Server Management Studio Graphic User Interface and T-SQL Script. These two methods we're going to use to create a synonym. Now again, I would like to mention that you can create synonyms on the local, and you can create synonyms on the remote server. Let's say that you're accessing, this is your remote server, this is your remote database, so you're accessing the table. You can create locally a synonym, and that become, your table become basically a local table, and you can go ahead and use in your application. You can also use the same thing. Instead of putting schema name, if you're connected with the same server, you don't need to put the same server name. If you're connected with the same database, you don't need to put the database name. And if you are, your default schema is the schema of that table, you don't need to put the schema name. However, if the things are other way around, then you can create locally a synonym and can use that particular table and synonym, and your application will work fine. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's my SQL Server, Tech Brothers client, and SQL Mirror is my instance name. And first what we're going to do is create a synonym locally, and we will go ahead and basically check that if that works fine for us. So we're going to go ahead in sales orders, we're going to go ahead and create new synonym. you need to give synonym name my table, and schema of the synonym DBO, I'm going to give DBO. Now server name, if you're connected with the same server name, you really don't need to give the server name up here. And if you can see right here, you can access, that means that when you're creating locally, it knows that this is the server that you're connected with, so you don't need to give the server name. You need to give the database name up here, and also the schema of the table. Keep in mind, let me go back real quick. Right here, this table name, this whole connection, this table name is the base of your synonym. This is the base table. So if base table changes, you need to drop the synonym and get the new connection, make the synonym you don't need with the same name, and that way you don't have to change the make changes in your application. So just wanted to quickly mention that. So the base table schema, this is the base table schema. My base table schema, if you look at it right here, is DBO. DBO customers, these are the tables that I'm concerned about. So my base table schema is DBO. Keep in mind, if base table schema is different, you need to provide this base table schema right here. So up here you have object types. These are again all user defined. They're not system. You cannot make synonyms of system tables, system views, and system stored procedures. So we're gonna go ahead and select tables in this particular demo, and object name right here, it will bring the object name. I'm concerned about the customers, so I just my synonym name is my table for this particular customer. Now permissions, if you need to if you have local permission to go and look at the synonyms, that's good. If not, you need to add users right here, and they can access this synonym. So we're going to go ahead and click OK on this. As you can see right here, the synonym is created. Let's go ahead and query the synonym. Select asterisk from the synonym, my table. So if you look at it, I don't have data in that table, but it brought all the column names. And let's go and do the same thing with actually the base table to see that whether it is accessing the right table or not. So we're gonna go ahead and execute this. As you can see, first name, last name, no data. So it is working locally. So this is how you create a synonym locally. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna delete this synonym and use our T-SQL to do this local synonym. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to pull my script right here. This is create synonym locally right here. If you notice right here, this is dbo.customer for sales order database name DBO customers. Since I am connected with the local server, I don't need to provide the local server name. So we're gonna go ahead and run this, and I am going to do the synonym up here. Let's name it my table. So we're gonna go ahead and execute it, and command completed successfully. Let's refresh, and you can see it's my table. And let's select the data from the synonym. Alright, as you can see, it's working fine. Now this is one part of the synonym that is locally. Now we are going to go ahead and do, let's say we're accessing the remote server, which is most of the case for applications, because application usually do not reside on the same database server. In many organizations, they reside basically on a different server. So this is just to show you that how to create locally if you wanted to create a locally synonym. But mostly used synonyms are the remote server access of the objects of the database. So we're going to go ahead and do that. There are a couple parts to, we're going to go ahead and delete this synonym. So there are a couple parts basically how you can get to, let me put a new query. Number one, you need to have a linked server. Linked server, that is your remote SQL server where your database and the table or whatever database objects you're concerned about. Once that's created, then we can go ahead create remote synonym. Then we can go ahead. These are the two things that we need to take care when we're working towards remote synonyms. So let's go ahead and create our link server first. And just to show you what my other server is, I'm going to show you right here is TechBrothersIt SQL prod. This is my other server, and right here is the database that we're going to connect with, sales orders. So we're going to go ahead and create a link server of this database right here, SQL Server. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this, and I'm going to go ahead and create SQL Server link server. Right click, new link server. Since it's going to be since it's going to be it is a SQL server, so I don't need to really provide the providers. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll cover the link server in a separate demo to use other data sources than SQL Server. So all I need to do right now is give the SQL Server complete name. That is TBS SQL is my server name, and SQL prod PROD is my instance name. Now it is very important that you look at the security, because if you don't do the security part, then it's not going to create a link server for you. So up here, the best way to do it, you have an options right here. If there is a lot of trust between these two servers, then you can use either of these options. But if there is not much trust, you need to put a security context up here and give the username that can connect to your remote server. In my case, I do have a SQL Server user, DB manager, and I'm going to put a password for that. And as soon as I'll click OK in this, it should connect. If it gives you error, that means that it's not really going to create. It'll still ask you that whether you wanted to, it couldn't connect to remote server, whether you wanted to go ahead and create the link server. So make sure that the connection gets succeeded right here in this screen. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. As you can see there, we didn't see any error. And another way to test your link server is working, you can go ahead and right click on the link server and test connection. Connection succeeded. That means that this link server basically is accessible for us. And other thing is that all the databases, since this particular user is sysadmin on that database, so we're going to go ahead and look at it can access all the databases on that remote server. So our first part right here, link server creation, is completed. Now we're going to go ahead and create a remote synonym on this server. So this is my TBS client server. So we're going to go ahead and right click on the synonym, new synonym. It's basically, basic idea is same, my table. And we're going to go ahead and give DBO the schema of this synonym. And server name would be your link server name right here. So I'm going to go ahead and TBS SQL /SQL PROD. That's my, and database name is prod. If you really have a good connection, you'll be able to access the databases right here. But if you don't access the database, don't worry about it. Just put manually the database name, and up here is the schema name again for the base table. Object type is table in my case. You can use views or stored procedure, whatever you want to do. And right here, if you click up here, it's not bringing up the objects because first of all, my connection is really slow. The second is that there could be a permission issue with the user that's creating this synonym. So up here, I'm going to go ahead. I know my customer table customers. That's my base table. If you really look at it, let me show you real quick. We're gonna go in the database, sales orders, tables, and right here is customers, dbo.customers. So this is my table, and if you don't know the table, you can go ahead and basically get the table name if you wanted to do manually. So we're gonna go ahead and customers, make sure that when you manually type it, you don't do any typo here in customers. So permission is the same. Basically it's just exactly the way that you create the synonym in locally, you same, but up here you have to provide the link server when you're creating the remote synonyms. So we're gonna go ahead and click OK, and we're gonna go in our database and see if synonym is created. Yes, there is. So let's go ahead and select from this synonym and see if it's working. As you can see, it's working. It brought the column name. I do not have any data in those tables, but in your case you will have a lot of data. So this is how you create, using SQL Server Management Studio graphic user interface, the remote synonym. I'm going to go ahead and delete everything and use the script, SQL Server Script, to create the link server as well as create the remote synonym. So I'm going to go ahead and load. First we need to do is create the link server. So I'm going to go ahead and load that script. As you can see that right here, password right here, it will go ahead and create that, but this password is not gonna work. It's all hash. You need to reset the password after you create the link server using the script that you created. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this script. Wrong server. So we're gonna go ahead and click on TBS client and paste it right here and create. Alright, command completed successfully. Let's refresh our link server. As you can see, TBS SQL Server is created, and as I said that when it created the up here is a username and the password is hash. It does not recover the password automatically. If you try to test the connection, it's going to fail. Okay, as you can see, login failed for the user DB manager. So what you can do is right click, go to properties. You can basically put the password here. I don't want to put it right now in the script. I wanted to keep it a bit secret. So up here, I'm going to reset the password. Not resetting the password, putting again the password really. So I'm going to test the connection, and connection is succeeded. So that worked fine for us. Our first task is completed. Now let's load our synonym, remote synonym script. Let's make sure that we're connected with the right server this time. Yes, we are connected with the right server. And up here, the synonym name is my customer, and up here, as you can see, that the difference between remote and local. Locally, we didn't have this server name right here. You had an option to put the server name, but you don't have to since you're connected with the same server. But this is our link server name right here, and this is the database, this is the schema name, and this is the table name. So we're going to go ahead and run this. It's successfully completed. Let's go and check, refresh the synonyms, and my customers is the synonym. Let's go ahead and select the data from this synonym and see if it's working for us. As you can see, it's working. So this is how basically you create synonyms using SQL Server Management Studio graphic user interface and using T-SQL. I hope this video helps.